Okay, now can we start? Are you ready? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. You are ready? Okay, now you can see the slide. You can see the PowerPoint slide.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. All right, now, okay, we are starting our next lecture. I added some more slides than the presentation that I have uploaded to the system. It's not so important a little bit now. It's lengthy, but it's okay. In this part of our lecture today, we are going to learn about pulmonary volumes and capacities. You will also learn, I guess, these in the lab practices, laboratory practices, how to record pulmonary volumes, the instrument used to record pulmonary volumes is spirometry or spirometry, this technique, the name. Spirometer is the instrument, the name of the instrument. Examples of lung diseases, I hide the slide. I am not going to discuss them in this lecture, although it is here in the contents. We are not going to discuss them. And then we will see determination of functional residual capacity, residual volume, and total lung capacity by helium dilution method, because recording changes of the pulmonary volumes by spirometry is not able to measure the functional residual volume directly. Helium is used to measure them. And then we will learn how to calculate the minute respiratory volume. And then the dead space, we are going to learn what dead space is, and then how to calculate alveolar ventilation. And then later on we are going to learn about functions of the respiratory passages, trachea, nose, etc. And then we will talk about constricting or dilating factors of the bronchial smooth muscles. And then cough reflex, sneeze reflex, and vocalization we are going to learn about. Now the pulmonary volumes and capacities. In clinics, in chest clinics, you will see they measure the lung volumes and capacities there in lung diseases, okay? This is a classical spirometer. You see the patient is breathing. There's an upside down, a cylinder upside down inside of the water, floating, swimming. Maybe the other one is better. Now the patient is breathing from the inside of the chamber, okay? So when the person breathes in, takes breath, inspirate, the air inside of the drum will be decreased, okay? When it decreased, it will go downwards, and then the recording line will go outwards, just opposite. When the patient expirate, this time the air water-based spirometer. Today it is left. We are no longer using this. This is didactic. To understand the concept is good, but today there are digital spirometers. They can calculate the volume from the speed of the air flow. Okay, from flow to the volume they can calculate. So they are more practical. You can take them to the area. You can measure. You can do these lung volumes in schools, in plants. Okay. Okay. Let's see the volumes and capacities. This picture shows us the volumes. Here you see the tidal volume, or tidal volume is when we breathe at rest, okay? Breathe silently. We don't force ourselves at all. And then this is tidal volume, and it is about 500 milliliters. When we ask the patient to breathe as much as he can or she can, and then he can take extra air inside of his or her chest, and then it is inspiratory reserve volume, and it is about 3000 milliliters. Okay, 3000 milliliters. Again, when somebody is respirating normally, you can ask him or her to give air as much as he can or she can. Then he tries to give extra air as much as he can. Then this is the expiratory reserve volume, and it is about 1100 milliliters. Okay. When we expire, try to expire as much as we can, still we cannot empty our lungs completely. There is still air left inside of the lungs, and it is called residual volume. Residual volume. These are the volumes, okay? These are the volumes. If we repeat, tidal volume is the air going in and coming out at rest, and it is about 500 milliliters. Inspiratory reserve volume 3000 milliliters, and expiratory reserve volume is about 1200 milliliters. The inspiratory capacity consists of tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. So it equals to 3000 plus 500, altogether 3500 milliliters. If we look at functional residual capacity, it includes expiratory reserve volume and plus residual volume. So it is called functional residual capacity. The most important one is vital capacity. Vital capacity consists of tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume and plus expiratory reserve volume. So 3500 and 1100, so altogether 4600 milliliters. When we are measuring the vital capacity, we ask the patient, take as much as you can and give as much as you can. Okay, take your deep breath as much as you can, and then give this air out as much as you can. Expire it as much as you can, so you will get vital capacity. What else we see here is total lung capacity. Total lung capacity includes vital capacity plus residual volume. So this is the total lung capacity, 1200 plus 4600, altogether 5800 milliliters in a normal healthy man. Okay, these values will be a little bit lower in women. Also, these values are higher in taller and with a great mass man. Okay, giant man. These values will be higher, and minion type people in small size people, these values will go down, will be smaller. All right. This is another picture telling the same thing, the same information, giving the same information. So the amounts of these values are listed in this table. The volumes I have just mentioned and the capacities I have just mentioned to you. All right. Now I skipped the disease section, I guess, because we have a chapter, we have a presentation, final presentation about respiratory system diseases, so we can also learn that subject there. Now, abbreviations used in pulmonary medicine are listed in these tables. So when you work in intensive care units or in chest departments, then you are going to see and to use these abbreviations. VT, tidal volume, FRC, functional residual capacity, ERV, expiratory reserve volume, total lung capacity, vital capacity, compliance, dead space, gas, volume of alveolar gas, inspired volume per minute, expired volume per minute, shunt flow, what else? SO2, percentage of saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen, percentage saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen in arterial blood, etc. There are more here. PO2, partial oxygen pressure, PaO2, partial pressure of oxygen in alveolar case. Okay. RS, respiratory quotient, Q, cardiac output, CaO2, concentration of oxygen in arterial blood, etc. So using these abbreviations, we can make calculations. For example, vital capacity equals to inspiratory reserve volume, or total lung capacity equals to vital capacity plus residual volume. Again, total functional capacity. Functional residual capacity equals to expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume. Okay. Now we can measure them. We can directly measure them. It's okay. But how about residual volume? How about functional residual capacity? We cannot measure them. We can measure expiratory reserve volume, but we cannot measure residual volume. So if we cannot know how much the residual volume is, we cannot calculate the functional residual capacity. Okay. If we would like to learn about the amount of functional residual capacity, we need to use helium. Okay, helium dilution technique is used to measure functional residual capacity first. Once we measure functional residual capacity from the formula, from the equation of C1 V1 equals to C2 V2, we can calculate, we can measure the functional residual capacity using helium, and then we can simply take expiratory reserve volume from the functional residual capacity, take away, subtract that part so that we will reach the residual volume. We will be able to calculate it. All right, this is the formula. Functional residual capacity can be calculated using a formula. So we will use helium containing air, and the person will after normal expiration, the person will inspire helium containing air, and in the air he or she expires, the helium amount, helium concentration will be measured. So we know the previous volume and concentration of helium, and then we will also get final concentration of helium, so that we will estimate, we will calculate the final volume of helium which caused dilution that much, so that we will calculate actually functional residual capacity. The volume that the helium is diluted equals to functional residual capacity. Okay. After after measuring functional residual capacity by helium dilation method, we can subtract expiratory reserve volume so that we can find residual volume. Okay, once we know residual volume, then we can also go to the total lung capacity by adding functional residual capacity plus inspiratory capacity, or by adding vital capacity plus reserve volume, we can reach total lung capacity. Could you follow? Could you understand? Did you understand how to measure functional residual capacity by using helium dilation method? Do you have any questions about this topic? Did you get how to measure functional residual capacity? Do you have any questions about this, or I will skip it. Please let me know if you could understand. Did you okay. Okay, Yağmur, you say that I understood. Thank you. All right, I can continue then. Now the minute respiratory volume. Minute respiratory volume, how much air is taken in a minute. Okay, this is minute respiratory volume. The frequency of respiration times tidal volume, or how much air is taken by each inspiration. So normal adults, they breathe 12 times in a minute, and they take 500 milliliters of air each time. So simply by multiplying them, we can get 6,000 liters, or 6,000 milliliters, 6 liters per minute. Okay. As much as we can, and then we respire very frequently, 20 times a minute. Very hard to stand. Okay, a healthy person can stand only 1 minute and continue this only 1 minute, because so much carbon dioxide is lost, and then this will cause respiratory alkalosis. Okay. Alveolar ventilation. What is the difference between minute and alveolar ventilation? 100 milliliters of air, some of the air cannot reach to the alveoli. Okay, some of the air will stay in trachea, in bronchi. It will not reach, it will not arrive in respiratory bronchioles and alveoli later on. So there will be no gas exchange in this transmitting section of respiratory passages. Okay, so of the 500 milliliters of air, only 350 milliliters of it can reach the alveoli, where gas exchange can occur. 150 milliliter of it cannot enter the gas exchange. So that's why we call that part of the tidal volume which cannot enter the gas exchange as dead space. Okay? This section is named as dead space. The air in this section cannot enter gas exchange. So how to measure the dead space? In this time we use pure oxygen. Okay, we give the person to breathe pure oxygen, and then after inspiring the pure oxygen, we the nitrogen inside of the air that person expires. Okay, this is the graph as you see. We ask the patient to breathe from the pure oxygen, and after filling the lungs with pure oxygen containing air, actually very deep portions of the lungs there is air, and 150 milliliter of that space section where there will be no gas exchange, pure oxygen will stay there, and then when the person expires the air, in the beginning the air will have no nitrogen. Okay, will have no nitrogen. When if we record the nitrogen amount in the air expired by the patient, and then we can detect the nitrogen concentration in the air coming out by expiration. As you see, after 100 milliliters of expiration of the air, there is no nitrogen at all, and then after 100 and 150 milliliters of air, as you see, the nitrogen concentration in the air starts to increase, because now first pure oxygen came out because it didn't participate in the gas exchange. It was already there. When the patient expires, it expires this pure oxygen containing air out. So there is no nitrogen in this section, and then by time the nitrogen concentration in the expired air will start to increase because it is mixed in the alveoli. Okay, in the alveoli there is already air, and in this air there is high amount of nitrogen, so that we can calculate the area of gray area by the formula given here. So the gray area, we can calculate the dead space using this formula. All right, so that we will reach the dead space volume. If we give some numbers to the values, we can get 150 milliliters of dead space. This part will not enter the gas exchange. Okay. Now, normal dead space amount is 150 milliliters in young adults, and it increases by aging. There is also called physiological dead space. What is dead space? If all alveoli are entering gas exchange, then that space is the dead space, only 150 milliliters, that's okay. But in some disease, for example, chronic obstructive lung disease or emphysema disease, in these diseases, the alveoli will be ruptured and then will be enlarged. So all alveoli will not take part in the gas exchange. So this part is not entering gas exchange actually. Okay, so that space, anatomical dead space will be more because of non-functional alveoli, the presence of them in chronic obstructive lung disease. So in this case, the physiological dead space will be high anatomical dead space. Okay, this is physiological dead space. All right. Now, a rate of alveolar ventilation, it is easy to calculate. How to calculate it? Again, this time you will simply take away the dead space from the tidal volume. For example, 500 milliliters tidal volume and minus 150 milliliters of dead space. So each time 350 milliliters is the alveolar ventilation, okay, by each respiration, by each inspiration. So alveolar ventilation times frequency, you will get rate of alveolar ventilation, and it is about 4,002 milliliters. 4 liters and 4.2 liters per minute you will get when you calculate this. All right. Now finally the respiratory passages. How is it going? What is the time? Okay, time is okay. Now 3:30. I think we will finish in time. Trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. Air is distributed to the lungs. The trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. The trachea is the first generation of passageway, and the two main right and left bronchi are second generation passageways. Each division thereafter is an additional generation. So there will be 20 and 25 generations before inspired air reaches the alveoli. So you can see here the trachea, there is cartilage around the trachea, the fifth of the sixth of trachea is covered with cartilage, so it will be kept open all the time. The air passages are open all the time. If you think esophagus, it is closed most of the time when you swallow the food, and it will be open, otherwise it will be closed. On the other hand, the airways are always open, okay? Airways are always open. Whatever you do, you can sleep, you can exercise, you can study, airways are always open, don't forget. And then there will be a division, okay? This trachea is, generates new smaller branches until it reaches the alveoli. The walls of the bronchi and bronchioles are muscular. The walls are composed mainly of smooth muscle in all areas of trachea and bronchi not occupied by cartilaginous plates. If there is no cartilage, there will be muscle tissue in that side of the wall. The walls of the bronchioles are almost entirely smooth muscle except for the most terminal bronchioles. We call them as respiratory bronchioles, which have very few smooth muscle fibers. So many obstructive diseases of the lung result from narrowing of smaller bronchi and bronchioles, often because of excessive contraction of smooth muscle itself. For example, in asthma bronchiale, there is allergic reaction, and due to allergic reactions, there will be constriction in the bronchioles, in the smooth muscles of the bronchioles, and the patient cannot breathe very well. Okay. The greatest resistance to airflow occurs in the larger bronchi, not in the small and terminal bronchioles. Reason for high resistance in the larger bronchi is that there are relatively few bronchi in comparison with about 65,000 parallel terminal bronchioles, each of which passes only a minute amount of air. However, under disease conditions, the smaller bronchioles often play greater role in determining airflow resistance for two reasons. They are easily occluded because of their small size, and they are easily constricted because they have greater proportion of smooth muscle fibers in their walls. Okay. Also edema, okay? Edema, mucus secretion, and constriction of smooth muscles can easily block the air passage in these small size bronchioles. They don't have cartilage on their walls at all. Now, epinephrine and norepinephrine or sympathetic stimulus can cause dilation of the bronchial tree. Direct control of bronchioles by sympathetic nerve fibers is relatively weak because few of these fibers penetrate as far as the central portions of the lung. Bronchial tree, however, is exposed to circulating norepinephrine and epinephrine released from adrenal gland. Both of these hormones, especially epinephrine, because of its greater stimulation to beta-adrenergic receptors, cause dilation of the bronchial tree. So we use bronchodilators during asthma bronchial attack, okay? We give sympathicomimetic drugs, epinephrine containing or sympathicomimetic drug containing aerosols can be used in asthma attacks. Now, parasympathetic nervous system has just opposite effect, so it constricts the bronchioles. A few parasympathetic nerve fibers derived from vagus nerve penetrate the lung parenchyma. These nerves secrete acetylcholine, which causes mild to moderate bronchiolar constriction. When a disease such as asthma has already caused some constriction, parasympathetic nervous system often worsens the condition, make the condition bad, much difficult. When this occurs, administration of drugs that block the effects of acetylcholine, such as atropine, can sometimes be used to relax the respiratory passages sufficiently to relieve the obstruction. Okay? Now, I guess you get the point. Again, sympathico-mimetic drugs, they dilate the bronchioles. On the other hand, parasympathico-mimetic drugs, for example, acetylcholine, constricts the airways, air passages, make the situation worse in patients with asthma bronchiale. You can give epinephrine to increase the size to dilate the bronchioles, or you can block the parasympathetic system by using atropine. They both will dilate the bronchioles and the patient will be able to breathe easily. Okay? Now, Now, a respiratory surface is lined with ciliated epithelium, so including the nose and lower passages down as far as terminal bronchioles. Cilia beat continuously direction of their power stroke toward the pharynx. Okay, they beat continuously. There is mucus secretion covering inside of the respiratory passages. So when the amount of mucus is not very much, we swallow it at night. We are not aware that we swallow it at night. Okay, normal, healthy people, in terms of respiratory system, of course, they will not be aware of that they swallow their mucus when they are sleeping at night. Okay, but in patients, smoking people, or in patients working in dusty industries, then they will have so much sputum, so they have to clean it. They have to clean their passages, air passages in the morning every day. They have to cough and clean their respiratory passages in mornings. Now, coughing reflex. The bronchi and trachea are so sensitive to light touch that slight amounts of foreign matter or other causes of irritation initiate the cough reflex. The larynx and carina, the point where the trachea divides, is called the carina, are especially sensitive, and the terminal bronchioles and even the alveoli are sensitive to corrosive chemical stimuli such as sulfur dioxide or chlorine gases. Afferent nerve impulses pass from respiratory passages mainly through the nervus vagus nerve to the medulla of the brain. There, in the medulla, an automatic sequence of events is triggered by neuronal circuits of the medulla, causing the following effects. First, up to 2.5 liters of air is rapidly inspired, and the epiglottis is closed, and the vocal cords shut tightly to attract air within the lungs, and then the abdominal muscles contract forcefully, pushing against the diaphragm, while other expiratory muscles, such as internal intercostals, also contract forcefully. Consequently, the pressure in the lungs rises rapidly to as much as 100 millimeter mercury or more, and then vocal cords suddenly open widely so that air under this high pressure in the lungs explodes outward. Sometimes this air is expelled at velocities ranging from 75 to 100 miles per hour. So the strong compression of the lungs collapses the bronchi and trachea by causing their non-cartilaginous parts to invaginate inward, so the exploding air actually passes through bronchial and tracheal slits. Rapidly moving air usually carries with it any foreign matter that is present in the bronchi or trachea. Okay, now the sneezing reflex. Coughing. Now I am coughing. Okay, if there's something blocking the air passages will be thrown away by coughing reflex. Now the sneezing reflex. There's something inside of the nose. This is sneezing reflex, similar to coughing reflex, except that it applies to the nasal passages instead of the lower respiratory passages. Initiating stimulus of the sneezing reflex is irritation in the nasal passages. The afferent impulses pass in the fifth cranial nerve, nervus trigeminus, to the medulla where the reflex is triggered. A series of reactions similar to those for the coughing reflex takes place, but the uvula is depressed, so large amounts of air pass rapidly through the nose, thus helping to clear nasal passages of foreign matter. Now, normal functions of our nose. So our nose is very, very important. Maybe we are not aware of. When we can understand the importance of the nose in patients with a tracheostomy, okay? If there is a hole here and they breathe from the tracheostomy hole, generally in larynx cancer, they open it, larynx is removed, so the trachea is anastomosed, opened out here on the neck, okay? Then we can understand the importance of the nose. What our nose does? The air is warmed by extensive surfaces of the concha and septum, a total area of about 160 square centimeters in the nasal cavities. The air is almost completely humidified even before it passes beyond the nose, okay? And the air is partially filtered by our nose, hairs of the nose. These functions together are called air conditioning function of the upper respiratory passages. Ordinarily, the temperature of the inspired air rises to within 1 degrees of Fahrenheit of body temperature and to within 2-3% of full saturation with water vapor before it reaches the trachea. Okay, When a person breathes air through a tube directly into the trachea, as I said before, it's called tracheostomy. The cooling and especially drying effect in the lower lung can lead to serious lung crusting and infection. Okay, it makes the person vulnerable, susceptible to lung infection, bronchitis, and the pneumonia can develop in these patients easily. Filtration function of the nose is important. The hairs at the entrance of the nostrils are important for filtering out large particles. Much more important though is the removal of particles by turbulent precipitation. The air passing through the nasal passages hits many obstructing veins, the concha, the septum, the pharyngeal wall. Each time air hits one of them, the air changes the direction, and the particles suspended in the air, having far more mass and momentum than air, cannot change their direction and travel as rapidly as air can do. Therefore, they continue forward, striking the surfaces of the obstructions, the concha, and trapped in the mucous coating of the concha and transported by the cilia to the pharynx to be swallowed. Okay, they can't go to trachea and they can't go to bronchi. Size of particles are important for this trap in the respiratory passages. Nasal turbulence mechanisms for removing particles from air is so effective that almost no particles larger than 6 micrometers in diameter enter the lungs through the nose. This is a size a little bit smaller than the red blood cells. Of the remaining particles, many of them between 1 to 5 micrometers settle in smaller bronchioles as a result of gravitational precipitation. For example, terminal bronchiolar disease is common in coal miners because of settled dust particles. Some of the still smaller particles diffuse against the walls of the alveoli and adhere to the alveolar fluid. Smaller than half micrometers of them will remain suspended in the alveolar air, so they will come out by expired air. For example, the particles in cigarette smoke are about 0.3 micrometer. Almost none of them will be precipitated in the respiratory passages, so they will be expired, but some of it can still stay in alveolar fluid, and then there are alveolar macrophages. They will phagocytize and then remove them. Or there is also excess lymphatic circulation in of the alveoli, so they will clean the area by removing with lymphatic circulation. Now finally, vocalization. Creating sound, vocalization. Speech involves not only respiratory system but also specific speech nervous control centers in the cerebral cortex, respiratory control centers of the brain, and articulation and resonance structures of our mouth and nasal cavities. So speech is composed of two mechanical functions: phonation, which is achieved by larynx, and articulation, which is achieved by structures of our mouth. First, phonation. In the larynx, there are vibrating elements. We call them as vocal cords. The vocal cords, lateral walls of the larynx toward the center of the glottis, they are stretched and positioned by several specific muscles of the larynx itself. Okay, these are the vocal cords. You see them here. They're located here between the thyroid cartilage and arytenoid cartilage. There are many muscles here, transverse and thyroarytenoid and lateral cryoarytenoid muscles. As you see, also you can see full abduction, gentle, intermediate position when we whisper loudly, stage whisper, and phonation when we are speaking. So figure shows the vocal cords as they are seen when looking into the glottis with the laryngoscope. During normal breathing, the cords are wide open to allow easy passage of the air. During phonation, the cords move together so that the passage of air between them will cause vibration. All right, I think you can read these sections. Vocal cords can be stretched by forward rotation of the thyroid cartilage, posterior rotation by arytenoid cartilage. There are muscles taking part. All right. Now resonance. Three major organs of articulation are the lips, tongue, and soft palate on the upper side. They need not be discussed in detail here because we are all familiar with their movements during speech and other vocalizations. Resonators include the mouth, nose, and associated nasal sinuses, the pharynx, and even our chest cavity. Again, we are familiar with the resonating qualities of these structures. For example, the function of nasal resonators is demonstrated by change of voice quality when a person has severe cold that blocks the air passages to these resonators, so that we can easily understand if someone has a flu, okay, by listening to his or her sound. I think we have finished our subject. Today we learned about pulmonary ventilation. If I make a short summary, you have to keep in mind that compliance is important. The lung tissue compliance is quite high. Surfactant is important to decrease surface tension, and the surfactant secretion is not sufficient in babies born before 7 months of gestation. Okay, it is very difficult to inspire when there is no surfactant secretion. So these babies cannot cry when they are born, they cannot respirate, they die, okay? Because of it, it is called respiratory distress syndrome. We can treat these patients by applying positive intermittent pressure, artificial respiration, and also giving surfactant containing aerosol. It is very expensive drug, I guess, but can save lives. And for the respiration, we have to know about pressure changes in the pleural cavity. To inspire, to get air inside of the chest, we need negative pressure inside of the alveoli, inside of the pleural cavity. In the pleural cavity will be much more lower. So the difference between pleural cavity pressure and the alveolar pressure is called transpulmonary pressure. Transpulmonary pressure increases in fibrotic conditions, diseases, okay? In diseases causing fibrosis of the lung parenchyma. The main respiratory muscle is diaphragm. In resting conditions, diaphragm is sufficient to respirate. It contracts and increases the chest volume, and then when it is released, then thoracal cavity will return to its original position itself. So this is resting respiration. There is also external intercostal muscles helping diaphragm to increase the chest size. Internal intercostal muscles and abdominal muscles, they are expiratory muscles. They help expiration during exercise or forceful respiration. We have learned about lung volumes and capacities. Spirometer, they are used by spirometer. Okay, tidal volume 500 milliliters, inspiratory reserve volume 3000, expiratory reserve volume 1100, residual volume 1200, and then capacities. Okay, inspiratory reserve capacity including tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume 3500. Functional residual capacity, expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume altogether 2,300 milliliters. Vital capacity is important, includes tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, and expiratory reserve volume altogether 4,600 milliliters. Total lung capacity is 5,800 milliliter. Okay, residual volume plus vital capacity. How to measure functional residual volume? By helium dilation method. We can use it, we can measure it, V1C1, okay? And how to measure that space? We use pure oxygen inspiration. We let the patient to inspire pure oxygen and then give it out. When it comes out, we measure nitrogen in the air expired. In the beginning, it will be very negative. There is no nitrogen at all, so we can calculate the volume by using the area with gray area in the graph. Okay. From functional residual capacity measurement, we can subtract the expiratory reserve volume to get residual volume. Okay, and then once we know the residual volume, we can go to total lung capacity if we measure the vital capacity. And we have learned about minute ventilation. Minute ventilation equals to frequency of respiration times tidal volume. So it is about 6 liters. Alveolar ventilation, for the calculation of alveolar ventilation, we have to subtract that space from the tidal volume. So 500 minus 150, 350. 350 times 12, we will get 4,200 milliliters of alveolar ventilation. Okay, and we have talked about the role of respiratory passages. We have learned about that there is cartilage in respiratory passages, including trachea and main bronchi. And in the last section of the bronchi, there is no cartilage, and the walls are made of smooth muscles, and epinephrine, norepinephrine, and sympathetic stimulation causes bronchodilation, whereas acetylcholine or parasympathetic stimulation causes constriction in the smooth muscles in the bronchi. In asthma bronchiale, we have to give epinephrine or sympathicomimetic drugs to dilate the bronchi, constricted, or we can give atropine to stop parasympathetic activity, to stop acetylcholine. It also helps the dilation of the bronchus, small bronchioles in asthma attacks. We have mentioned about finally the role of nose. It warms the air, it filters the air, humidity will be increased. Humidity will be increased by the nose. We understand the importance of an organ when we lose it. Okay, in tracheostomy we lose the functions of the nose. In this case, the cooling and drying effect can cause crusting in the respiratory passages, drying of the secretions. Okay, and easily development of pneumonia or bronchitis in patients with tracheostomy. And then we finally mentioned about phonation, vocal cords, the functions of vocal cords, and phonation, resonance. For the resonance, we need nasal cavities, we need pharynx, even we need chest. Okay, that's all for today. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, you can ask, and I am ready to answer to your questions. I don't know if you have any other lecture now after me. Okay, is there any questions you have? Do you want to have any questions?
Hocam,
Efendim?
bu bronşiyaller, sempatik ve parasempatik olayları ben tam anlayamadım. Orayı rica etsem bir Türkçe özet geçebilir misiniz?
Tabii geçebiliriz. Şimdi astım bronşiyale gibi hastalıklar var. Bunlar alt solunum yollarının alerji nedeniyle, daha çok böyle polenler nedeniyle yani çiçek tozları nedeniyle bazı mevsimlerde artıyor bu astım. Bronkokonstrüksiyon oluyor ve kişi nefes almakta çok zorlanıyor. Bu durumlarda bizim sempatikomimetik yani epinefrin, norepinefrin veya ona benzer ilaçlarla bu bronş daralmasını açmamız gerekiyor. Ya da parasempatik sistemin etkisini engelleyici, asetilkolinin etkisini bloke edici atropin de kullanabiliriz. Böylece astım ataklarını tedavi edebiliriz. Yani sprey şeklinde ilaçlar var. Bunlar içlerinde bronkodilatatör maddeler içeriyorlar. Genellikle sempatikomimetik ilaçlar yani adrenalin benzeri, noradrenalin benzeri ya onda epinefrin var ya da ona benzer ilaçlar oluyor bu spreylerin içerisinde. Parasempatik sistem daraltıyor, sempatik uyarılar genişletiyor. Farmakoloji derslerinde veya ilerideki solunum göğüs hastalıkları stajlarınızda bunları daha ayrıntılı tedavi protokollerini öğreneceğinizi sanıyorum. Evet, başka soru var mı?
Sağ olun hocam.
Bundan sonra dersiniz var mı şimdi?
Yok hocam bugün.
Yok. O zaman devam edebiliriz. Başka sorular varsa alabilirim. Tamam. Evet. Teşekkür ederiz. Güzel bir soru. Bugün biraz maceralı bir ders oldu. Ee, Yani Allah sevdiği kuluna önce eşeğini kaybettirirmiş, sonra buldururmuş. Biz de yani bu PowerPoint'i bir türlü paylaşamadık sunumu. Sonradan düzeldi çok şükür. Ee, Dersimizi yapabildik. Yoksa bayağı bir sıkıntılı durumdu yani. Evet, çocuklar başka aklına soru gelen, kafasına takılan bir şey olan varsa sorabilir. Evet, bu ya her şeyi anladın mı?
Evet hocam.
Bu ya Muhammed'i. Anladım diyorsun. Peki, sana bir soru sorayım o zaman. Bu'ya. Alveoler ventilasyonu nasıl hesaplıyoruz? Duydun mu Puya?
Yes, we can calculate the alveolar with nitrogen measuring. As you said, we calculate the gray area and so on, something like this.
No. I asked alveolar ventilation. I didn't ask dead space measurement. Let's
We can
say you
substitute
know.
the
Let's
dead
say,
space. Yes.
let's say you know the dead space, okay? Already. It is about 200 milliliters, dead space volume. And tidal volume is about 600 milliliters. And then times of breathing frequency is, let's say, 15. So can you calculate the alveolar ventilation in this person? So 15 times of respiration in a minute, 600 milliliter tidal volume, and 200 milliliters dead space volume. What is the alveolar ventilation in this patient? How can you calculate?
So for every inspiration, we have 400 milliliters, and when we multiply it by 15,
Yes.
it gives us 6 liters for
6 liters.
alveolar.
Yes. You subtracted already the dead space from the tidal volume, right?
Yes, exactly.
600 minus 200, and this is alveolar ventilation. How about minute ventilation calculation? How can you calculate the minute ventilation?
We multiply the numbers of ventilation per minute and the Tyndall volume.
Tidal volume. In this case, how is it? How much is it?
It will be about 9 liters, I think.
Okay, 600 times 15, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. All right. How about the function of nose? Is it important? Our nose is important for health?
Yes, as you said, it's beneficial for filtering the particles and also for warming the air and moisturing, I think.
Yes, the air is very important. And also heating, yes, warming, yes. When we lose these functions, then in tracheostomy, then pneumonia or bronchitis, infections of the respiratory system occurs easily in these patients. All right. How about residual volume? How can we calculate residual volume, or how can we measure the residual volume? Can we directly measure the residual volume in a patient?
As you said, we cannot directly measure it, but we can use the helium dilation with oxygen, and then we can measure the amount of difference between concentration of helium in
Yes.
inspiration and expiration. And then we can calculate the amount of residual volume.
Yes, first we will get functional residual capacity by using helium dilation method, and then we will get residual volume subtracting of what? We will subtract from functional residual capacity, we will subtract which volume to get residual volume?
Vital volume? I'm not sure.
From the functional residual capacity consists of residual volume plus
Vital volume.
expiratory reserve volume. Okay?
Yes, yes.
Residual volume plus expiratory reserve volume. So if we subtract expiratory reserve volume, we will get residual volume. Once we know residual volume, which capacity we can calculate? If we add residual volume to vital capacity, which capacity we will get?
Total capacity of the lung.
Total capacity, total lung capacity. Okay. All right. How about transpulmonary pressure? If it increases, what does it mean?
I think, as you said, in old people, it will be increased, and it makes the work of lung harder. So we need more negative pressure for inspiration.
Okay, fibrosis conditions. Okay, in fibrotic, if a lung parenchyma will be fibrotic due to sarcoidosis, due to tuberculosis or such disease, asbestosis, silicosis. There are many lung diseases you will learn in future. If the parenchyma tissue becomes fibrotic, then for the inspiration, we need more negative intrapleural pressure to get lower intraalveolar pressure. Okay, so the transpulmonary pressure will be increased in these patients. Breathing will be more difficult in these patients. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Başka soru veya katkı? How about smoking? How many of you smoke? Are there any of you smoking? I am sure there are many. Who wants to confess? Who wants to say I am smoking? Nobody. Do you know what is the use of smoking? Why do you smoke? can any of you tell me why he or she smokes cigarette? I don't smoke, but I have family members smoking. Do you know any use any benefits of smoking? Do you know? Is there any answer? Or what is the benefit of smoking? Do you know? Bad sides of smoking, I can say. What is the bad effects of smoking? Smoking prevents ciliary movements, okay? Ciliary movements. The cilia cannot clean the air passages, cannot clean the mucus, okay? So smoking is bad for the ciliary epithelium. It also causes the transformation of the ciliary epithelium into the stratified epithelium, okay? It is called metaplasia, I guess. Metaplasia. And next step is cancer, okay? The smoking in the long run can cause cancer. Please don't smoke. If you can do it, you can quit smoking as soon as possible. By the way, what is the use of nicotine? Is it helpful for any function of us? I can say yes. It is helpful for concentration. Okay, you can concentrate better. You can maybe learn better. I don't know. If it is correct, it prevents the development of Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, but not that clear. There is not so much evidence about that. I guess that's all today. If you don't have any questions, I can stop here. Okay? I am finishing the recording. Can I finish the recording? All right, I'm finishing the recording. And